Hello again, everybody. Jim Hickey, also known as @Bass Fishing Tips on Twitter, back to you with a new series of videos. And actually, there's going to be videos like this produced on a fairly regular basis. And it's going to be under the category of What Doc Thinks. Okay, so this is going to be my thoughts on various topics that happen to either come up on Twitter, on Facebook, or social media, or things I read about, or just things that strike me that I think need to be discussed. And that's actually where I'm coming from today. It's not uncommon for me to get photos posted both to my Facebook page as well as my Twitter account from a lot of different fishermen, because they're proud of the catches they have at any given moment. And most of the time, it's apparent that those fish are caught on the water. I think all bass fishermen who generally have a mindset of catch and release, believe that they're going to get released. But in many cases, there are pictures that are obvious that the fish aren't getting released. Like maybe they're sitting on a cutting board, or maybe they're sitting on, somebody's back porch, or maybe they're sitting, or the picture's taken with the fish on a stringer. Obviously, it doesn't look like those fish are going to be released. And again, for the last 3 decades or more, bass fishermen have been kind of trained, if you will, mainly because of the advent of tournament fishing, about catch and release. Release all the bass you catch. And although, I'm an advocate of that, I keep very few bass, if ever. I just don't like, I love to eat fish, I just don't like to eat bass. So there's no reason for me to keep those. Um, some people do like to eat bass, and in reality, if all of us release all the bass we catch, in many lakes, that can have as great of a negative effect as overharvesting. So, after a decade or so of catch and release, this call for selective harvest started to come out and hit the waters, or the airwaves, excuse me, or the media, print media, television media, whatever the case may be. And so what selective harvest really gets down to is basically harvesting the fish that's going to best optimize the fisheries that we are utilizing. And, most state agencies strive diligently to initiate catch limits, limits on the number of fish we can keep, both relative to size and to the numbers of fish, in order to best optimize the fisheries in a given area. And if they have specific goals or specific issues with specific bodies of water, they will tailor specifically the regulations to those bodies of water in many instances. One case where that was in play about a decade ago, a little over a decade ago, I had moved out to Missouri, and just on the east side of the town that I was living in was this phenomenal lake called Mozingo Lake, which is actually a reservoir that was about 10 years old at that point. Well, there was an overabundance of small bass in that lake. So, the state Department of Conservation, in conjunction with the local folks who manage the lake, instituted a policy, a slot limit, to protect fish in the prime spawning range of, 12 inches, and I think I can't remember, it was 16 or somewhere on inches at that point. And there to stress the harvest of fish that were undersized, less than 12 inches, and stress the need to not overly overharvest the larger fish as well. So again, agencies are there, they set rules and limits in order to manage these things, and it's best to keep that in mind. Quite often when I see those pictures posted, there'll be people who chime in and say, "Oh, you need to release those fish." Sometimes it's a gentle hint, sometimes it's a nasty comment. We really need to think about how we're doing that. In one other instance, a couple of months ago, somebody posted some pictures that were obviously where the fish were harvested, and somebody jumped all over him. A couple of people did, and he fired back and said, "Look, this is my pond. I pay to put those bass in there every year. They will not overwinter, so I harvest them selectively over the summer in order to make sure that the pond doesn't have more than it can actually keep over the winter." So we don't always know the whole story. You know, I think we need to be a little more diligent. Maybe make a comment. Well, be careful so that you don't overharvest fish from a given body of water because you don't want to go depleting populations. One last example I'll give you. For years, I lived out here on the East Coast, down in Cape Cod in Massachusetts, and there was a bass fishery that, as far as I'm concerned, was probably the best quality bass fishery in southeastern Massachusetts. And I fished that pond um, during the main part of the season at least once a week, if not more than that. And I was always expecting to catch a couple of fish that were, 4 pounds or better, and usually a 5 pounder per day or better fish per day. Sometimes you wouldn't see a 6 or 7 pound fish or greater, but I could always count on catching a number of quality bass. Well, after several years, regretfully, some people got wind of that. And they started to go in there and overharvest the larger fish, particularly during the ice season. And after a decade or more, you started to see the number of big bass being caught start to dwindle. So we really need to think about what we're doing. We don't want to leave too many bass in a lake and have it get overpopulated with small fish. We want to make sure that we work with those people who are trying to manage these things and controlling the size of fish in each one of these lakes. All right, just my thoughts today on selective harvest. Remember, be a little more forgiving before you go jumping on somebody's back because you see them catching a bass. They may actually be doing you a favor. That's the thought for today. We'll be talking again real soon with other thoughts. Have a wonderful day.